So this is what it's like with the news cycle. So literally within seconds of finishing the recording of last week's show, Woody Allen's book publisher dropped the book.
Yeah.
Like,
it's a funny thing because as you came in, you were telling me you had just pre-ordered the book.
I know. It's
and boom, 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 boom. Odd thing. When you told me you pre-ordered the book, I was like, wow. The publisher's got the ball to publish Woody's book, and I was all proud. And less than an hour later,
I am so ashamed of Hachette. I'm so ashamed.
That's the publisher.
It's just the publisher. That is so cowardly. They try to make it sound like, well, we value our relationships with our staffers, and they all complain. I'm thinking, you know what? Fire them. Just fire every last one of them, because if you're a staffer at a publishing house, you really don't have any business weighing in on what the publishing house publishes. You really don't. If you don't like it, get a job elsewhere.
Yeah,
work for Larry Flint or somebody.
Yeah, look, if you're a senior vice president, I mean staffers. I don't know what they mean by staffers, but you, like, there are people in the context of a publishing company for whom these are questions and issues, and the receptionist isn't one of them.
In every company, there are two classes of people: the people who make decisions and the people who live with decisions,
who execute the decisions, or quit and go
away. Yeah. I mean, it's not a democracy. I'm sorry, it just isn't. You don't get a say, and that's very disappointing. And I just find that so cowardly. And somebody else will pick it up.
And then there's that. And then there's that. The thing in and of itself.
There's some snotty staffer. This was reported by Vox. This snotty little staffer. Man, I would just love to dox the hell out of this person. Who had the temerity to say we want to cancel the book. It's like, wait a minute, hold on a second. And apart from your ridiculous demand of an apology from the CEO, you want to cancel the book? You want to prevent me from making my own decision about the book, from getting it, from reading it, making my own mind up? You want to prevent that. And you want to control that. How is that different from burning? That
baseline thing is what they seem to not get. You don't understand that this is not. It's not your decision whether or not by we mean you over sitting there, Wade and Tim sitting here. You don't decide whether or not we get to read Woody Allen's book.
Woody Allen is not Roman Polanski. He is an innocent man in a country that says innocent till proven guilty. He was not charged. He was looked at, and they did not charge him.
Let me be super duper clear. If he were like guilty as hell, you know what you still don't get to do? Cancel his book. We don't do that here. He's not, by the way, but nevertheless, if he was writing from prison, you still don't get to cancel his book. We don't do that here. What you get to do is not buy that book.
That's it.
And then that company, if there's a punishment that comes, it'll be that, goddamn, we printed 10,000 copies of that book, nobody wanted it. And if there's a punishment to the CEO, that's your punishment.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you print that book and 10,000 people buy it, well, then we did the right thing because people wanted that book.
I am stunned at these people, at these staffers at these companies who think that they have this kind of power. It's not a democracy.
It's all in the sort of logical, philosophical reasoning. Look, I got 2-3 copies of Mein Kampf around this apartment right here, where I live, because we do not live there. We don't make decisions like that here in America. So that's a failure. That's a big fail.
It's a big failure. It's an embarrassment
on the part of both those who would want to cancel and those who would allow it to happen.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to stand for it.
Yeah, you just what you get to do is not buy the book. That's all you get to do.
Not going to stand for it. Well, with that fun note, I'm going to start off with some music this week. Blow through some Naxos classical stuff, of which there is a fair amount, and it is all really, really good this week. And then I got a couple other things that are not necessarily classical. Opus Arte is, of all the lines that Naxos carries, is really just one of the best. They keep getting some really wonderful performances. This is all Blu-ray. From the Royal Opera House and the Royal Ballet in London is La Bayadère, which is absolutely beautiful and so magnificently put together. Some of the most superb dancing you will ever see. It's based on a classic Natalia Makarova 19th century ballet. It's one I've seen a couple of times previously. This is easily one of the best. Absolutely spectacular and beautiful. Some of the best dancing you'll ever see. Some of the most creative ballet. Verdi's La Traviata needs no introduction. That's also from the Royal Opera in London, directed by Richard Eyre, who has done a number of movies. and who is an absolutely superb director. I've been wondering, why hasn't he done any more movies? You know, he did the one with Kate Winslet and Judi Dench as the same famous figure, old and young. Yeah, you remember?
I'll look it up.
Yeah, look that up. Richard Eyre did that, a very good film from probably about 15 years ago, and he's, you know, I always forget he's a really, really good opera director too. So Placido Domingo is in this, and it is a wonderful version of La Traviata. Also from the Royal Opera House and the Royal Ballet is something I'm less familiar with. It's a combination of things from Within the Golden Hour, Medusa, and Flight Pattern. I'm not familiar with any of it. This is contemporary ballet and some interesting stuff. Didn't quite light me on fire just because the music isn't my thing. The most interesting of all of them, obviously, is Medusa, which is inspired by the myth. The choreographer here is Sidi Larbi Sherkawi. And it's all done to this kind of weird techno score that it's a little too modern for me. But, you know, it's solid dancing. It's just not necessarily my style. And then this is absolutely excellent. This is Written on Skin, Lessons in Love and Violence. This is the orchestra of the Royal Opera House and the Royal Opera, directed by Katie Mitchell and conducted by George Benjamin. This is a modern opera in two parts, at least as I understand it. A little bit kind of hard to follow. Written on Skin and Lessons in Love and Violence. They are two separate pieces to like a single corpus, I guess it is. And it's thematically tied together and written by George Benjamin and Martin Crimp together. And it's a little weird. I still have a problem sometimes with modern operas because I don't quite follow, you know, opera feels like it belongs in a different era. That being said, there's some very, very interesting stuff going on here thematically and narratively. Gets into, you know, the relationship between Edward II and Piers Gaveston in Lessons in Love and Violence, which is all a very recent Edwardian history. Written on Skin is very, very timely, all about the impact of wealth on your family and your personal relationships. So, modern opera can be very, very challenging, and Written on Skin and Lessons in Love and Violence are two of them.
Iris.
Oh, there it is. That's the film.
That's 2001.
Can you believe that?
That's why I couldn't remember it. It was damn near 20 years ago. Oh, my God.
We see 150 movies a year.
Yes.
Not including all the Blu-ray and DVD stuff. Yeah. Not including streaming. So, you up that to over 200. That's 2,000 movies ago.
Yeah, that's
a little hard to keep track of those things. But yes, Iris.
Yet now it all comes flooding back to me.
Yeah, wow. So anyway, then we also have Galerie Dorée, the Tricentennial Concert, or the Concert of the Loge, from Paris. This was filmed in the actual Golden Gallery in Paris, which is one of the 800,000 historic wonders of the world that you have in Paris. But it's an absolutely wonderful, wonderful concert. Features a lot of extraordinary musicians and performers in this wonderful, wonderful environment, and it's something to put on in the background and just sort of enjoy classical music in a wonderful classical location. Volume 2 of Leonard Bernstein's Young People's Concerts with the New York Philharmonic.
Love those.
They're so good, aren't they? This is 4 Blu-rays, and we, of course, have a Leonard Bernstein movie on the way, a biopic on the way, courtesy of Bradley Cooper, who is going to direct the film and play Bernstein, which I know our friend David Aaronstein, who's a big Bernstein fan, has a problem with that, but I actually think it's really good. I like Bradley Cooper as an actor, a writer, as a quadruple threat. But I also think he looks like Bernstein.
At a certain age.
At a certain age. That young Bernstein, I think Cooper's going to kill it.
I mean, Lenny was not what you call buff.
Yeah.
So if I were Bradley, he needs to lose 30 or 40 pounds.
He'll do it.
And lean up. And then, he's got that Lenny thing.
He'll do it. He beefed up for American Sniper.
Yeah, exactly.
He can do that.
Yeah.
He can do that. He's not going to go Christian Bale on us, but, He can go a little macrobiotic for a few months.
which we all need to do.
Which we probably all do need to do. But anyway, this was something, of course, that aired on television throughout the 1960s. It started in the 50s, ended in the 70s, 58 to 72. But basically, it's a phenomenon of the 60s. And Leonard Bernstein made over 50 of these programs that sort of brought classical music into the average American home and exposed young people to classical music in a vibrant way that had never happened before. It's wonderful. It's just wonderful. So this is volume 2, 4 Blu-rays, and it'll touch your heart, and you'll fall in love with the music and the people and Bernstein in particular. It's great, just absolutely great. We also have from Bel Air. Traviata, Vous méritez un avenir meilleur, which is based on La Traviata, but it's also based on La Dame aux Camélias by Alexandre Dumas fils, the son. So it's kind of it's sort of interesting. I'm not familiar with the Dumas piece that they use to sort of fold it into, but if you are familiar with La Traviata, it's very, very interesting. What I'd be curious to find out is this is directed by Corentin Leconte. I'd be curious to know if that's any relationship to Patrice Leconte. I suspect not, but nonetheless, it is a very interesting variation on the Traviata theme. Swan Lake, Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake needs no introduction. This is the ballet company of the National Opera of Ukraine. It's just always amazing. I don't know if it's the best Swan Lake. They're all kind of amazing, but it's pretty great, and you can't go wrong with any of them. 2 more on the classical front is the Well-Tempered Clavier, Book 2, and Sir Andras Schiff on piano. The Johann Sebastian Bach Well-Tempered Clavier is absolute, or Clavier, however you want to pronounce it, is beautiful classic music. Andras Schiff, not a pianist I'm familiar with, clearly not British, but a sir. I don't quite know the deal, but anyway, this was at the 2018 proms at the Royal Albert Hall, which is an annual thing, and all I know is this: I just love listening to really well performed Bach, and that's what this is. So, not someone I'm familiar with, not an event I'm overly familiar with, but pretty great to listen to. And then Christian Thielemann and the Staatskapelle Dresden from Germany playing the complete symphonies of Schumann, and this is beautiful. I love Schumann's operas, all 4 of them. I'm a huge fan of Thielemann, and I just think this is wonderful. So put it on, watch it, and let it roll in the background. And the last 2 on the music front is CMA Awards Live, Greatest Moments from 2008 to 2015. This is on Blu-ray. Lots of great country music here that performed live at the CMAs, which is a really good awards show. It's the awards show that doesn't take itself too seriously. It understands it's only doing country music. Everybody's really nice and polite to each other because they're country people. And Keith Urban and Reba McEntire and Brad Paisley and Carrie Underwood and Kelly Clarkson even shows up with Jason Aldean for some strange reason. Loretta Lynn. I mean, it's George Strait and Alan Jackson. It's just great. It's really, really great. There's a lot of good stuff here. And Blake Shelton. And then lastly, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in concert. This is 164 performances on 6 Blu-rays from 2010 to 2017. 8 different induction ceremonies and everything that goes with them. It's really, really awesome. Time Life just nailed it with this one. There's almost nothing that's missing here. You could just watch this for hours and hours and hours. And that's a really cool thing, is that people forget the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, when they have their induction concerts, they make it look like everybody kind of got together at the last minute and just said, oh, let's just go have a jam session. It looks like that.
Yeah.
They work their asses off to prepare for these performances.
Yeah.
They really do, and they take them very seriously because it's an honor. You're not paid for when you're performing there. You're performing for the people who've honored you.
Yeah.
It's a little slightly different dynamic.
Yeah,
So
complications over there at the old Hall of Fame.
yeah,
With the Academy, actually,
Yeah.
not the Hall of Fame so
Yeah.
much per se,
Yeah.
but the Academy. Yeah.
true. That's a bit of a mess right
Yeah.
now, that
Yeah.
fiasco. But anyway, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in concert on Blu-ray. Terrific. Well done, Time Life.
Shall we move on to first I'm gonna knock off a few docs.
Yeah.
And then we've got some.
We got a few docs.
Some interesting TVE type stuff to do. Ray's Hell, The Life and Times of Molly Ivins. I remember talking about this particular doc on the show. Molly Ivins, of course, the larger than life, literally over 6 feet tall, Texas firebrand reporter. Late 60s, 70s, 80s. I kind of remember her from the 80s. That's when I started picking up on Molly Ivins. I remember when Lloyd Benson, senator from Texas, was running for vice president, I guess he was on the ticket, and Molly Ivins covering him. Really, really interesting stuff. We forget sometimes how democratic, how blue the state of Texas was. Ann Richards, governor of Texas, blue.
Yeah.
Years and years and years and years. Lyndon Baines Johnson, he came up out of Tennessee, Oklahoma, but, all that kind of stuff. And Molly Ivins was one of these big, sort of unabashedly democratic blue Texans. And she wrote very unapologetically from that point of view. And that's sort of covered in this doc. Interesting thing about Molly Ivins. Did you know this about Molly Ivins, the big firebrand Texas reporter? She's from Petaluma, California.
No kidding.
Born and raised.
Are you serious?
Petaluma, California. So
No
all of
kidding.
that Texas thing, and sure, I guess you moved to Texas and you
Let me
allow
tell you
yourself
something.
to,
Let me tell you something. I'm born and raised in California. I still don't know where Petaluma is. I don't.
It's Winona Ryder. I've actually been there. It's an interesting thing.
Where is it?
A little bit up north, below Santa Barbara.
Oh, see, I have no idea.
Yeah, above San Jose.
No idea.
Petaluma. There's nothing there but cabbage and but Molly Ivins, that sort of Texas persona. That's an interesting thing, given where she was actually from. I suppose it might be said that she was one of the first reporters who wore her political leanings on her sleeve. She was a wonderful writer, clever turns of phrase everywhere. They're all over this wonderful documentary. It's a lot of fun.
Awesome.
Molly Ivins, The Life and Times. You got one?
After Parkland from Kino Lorber, dealing, of course, with the shooting at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, in which 17 people died, and the After Parkland was shot for over the course of a year after the shooting, and it interviews just about everyone who wanted to be interviewed, obviously for something like this, to sort of raise awareness. It is an activist film. It is not trying to give you any kind of balanced argument about gun control. And it doesn't mean to, and it doesn't pretend to. What it says is, this was an event that happened, these are the people impacted by it, and here's how it impacted them. And that is certainly fodder for its own discussion. Yeah. But it puts human face on it, and it is a worthwhile film to watch.
It was in the mix last award season.
Yeah, it was. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so many good docs now. It's just so hard for some of them to break out. But yeah, it's After Parkland, had a great run at festivals, and it's very, very worth seeing.
Before Stonewall, a good restored documentary. This is newly restored. A film about the 1969 June 27th and 28th, 1969, raid on the gay bar, Stonewall.
Sure, that started the gay rights movement.
Started the gay rights movement. Absolutely fascinating. Just about many of the people who were there that evening, over those few evenings, are in this documentary, and that's what's fascinating about it. It's them describing the situation, what life had been like before and after those events, in their own words. The making of a gay and lesbian community. These look, it's astounding that from 1969 to 2020, how far we've come. Pete Buttigieg.
Yeah.
I guess he dropped out by the time this airs.
Yeah.
Of a race for president of the United States, and he had a pretty good shot at it there for a while. Certainly, it was not remotely ludicrous that he was running.
Yeah.
He was on the debate stage. I think every time. I think he did whatever it took to get on that debate stage every single time. So from 1969, these events to him on that stage, giving his husband a big old hug and a kiss. What is that? 50 years later? 59?
Yeah.
1950 years
about
later?
that.
About 50 years
about
later.
50 years later.
A decent amount of movement on the subject is what I would say. What do you got there?
Got The Cellist, The Legacy of Gregor Piatigorsky. If you'd never heard of Gregor Piatigorsky, he was Yo-Yo Ma before there was Yo-Yo Ma.
No.
And the first person to tell you that is Yo-Yo Ma, who is interviewed on this really, really wonderful doc. It's 103 minutes long. And it's a very, very workmanlike, unremarkable in craft, but remarkable in subject matter portrait of an astonishing figure in the world of classical music. You learn a lot too, not just about the music and the people and the world, but you learn a lot about the cello itself as an instrument, which I am really appreciative of. My wife loves the sound of the cello, and I think I love it even more now too. Also have the Oscar-nominated The Cave from the same director who did us previously The Last Men in Aleppo. The Cave was one of 2 Syrian-themed documentaries that were nominated for the Academy Award this last year. The Cave is from National Geographic, and it is a harrowing, really, really difficult film to watch. I, of course, was very wrapped into this because we had our short, which is a Syrian refugee-themed narrative short that connects to both For Sama and The Cave. Our short is about a mother and her daughter. The mother is a physician, a pediatrician. The Cave is about a woman, a Syrian doctor, female Syrian doctor, and For Sama is about a woman and her daughter.
And her husband, who's a Syrian doctor.
Yeah. So we had all kinds of common DNA with these films, and our director, Brandt, had some interface with the filmmakers at certain events and the BAFTAs leading up to this, and they were very aware of our film as well. So it's kind of a mutual admiration society. The Cave is specifically about work in a hospital that is right in the middle of the war zone, and it's a subterranean hospital. Like the where they're doing the hospital work is all underground, even as bombs are falling above ground. And people, they're helping people, and they're trapped underground sometimes, and they can't go above without missiles falling, and sometimes you're running out of stuff that you need. It's a hospital. We don't think of them as running out, but if you're in a war zone, you're going to start running out of alcohol. You're going to start running out of bandages. I mean, it's just so. How do you run a hospital? How do you do the job without just completely giving up hope? And the filmmakers are right in the middle of it. Faraz Fayyad, who already did this with Last Men in Aleppo, is so amazing and so dedicated to these people. It's just, my heart goes out to all of them. It is it's a remarkable thing, and I think we all hope that this conflict ends sooner than later. But what a wonderful film, and what a noble effort.
Oh man, Syria, what a mess! Jeez,
I know. Continues
to be. The Montessori education, the Montessori mode of education. Maria Montessori, 1907, established this method of teaching. It's a child-centered method of teaching that really allows the children to sort of progress at their own level, engage the things that they are interested in at the moment that they are interested in those things, and takes the teacher and pushes them to the background as a figure who is more or less guiding the children down paths at their own pace. And it's a very interesting sort of method of teaching. I know our colleague Greg Green, who writes with us over at DigiGods, his little girl Angel Montessori method. He was very particular about it. And you are you guys doing Montessori over there?
We are not. We are a public school family.
Yeah, but even that, the Montessori method is starting to insinuate itself into so many kinds of schools.
No, really?
It's becoming the most prevalent method of teaching. And let me point out that even in colleges and universities, it's starting to become a sort of a mode of teaching. I know that I've always leaned into it sort of with by nature as a teacher in various different ways and on various different levels. And I've always found it to be a very effective mode of teaching. Let the kids figure it out. And that's the name of this film, Montessori. Let the children be the guide. Interesting stuff there. So far as that is concerned. This doc here,
Cold Case Hammarskjöld.
Dag Hammarskjöld, 1961, United Nations Secretary General.
So amazing.
On a plane goes missing.
Yeah.
And never found. 50 years later, these Danish journalists, they decide they go. Now this plays like a thriller. This plays better than most thrillers play.
The disappearance and death of Dag Hammarskjöld or Hammarskjöld, however you pronounce it. really was something I was too young to.
No, yeah, I was born in 1961, so no, yeah. But it was still a relevant thing all through the 70s.
Yeah, it was. But I didn't even really know what the UN was till I was like 13. It's like, oh, it's a thing. Okay, but what's so fascinating about this doc is, number one, it's made in a very weird way. Like he the filmmaker is in it, and he hires these succession of secretaries, and there are these sort of recreations and whatnot. But what's interesting is that going to unraveling what happened to Hammarskjöld winds up being the least of what he discovers.
Exactly, yeah.
It opens up this thing. It goes sideways.
There are any number of false starts that lead them down these tributaries where all kinds of interesting stuff is found, none of which having to do with what happened to him.
No. And then when you find out what happened to him, it opens up, oh, and by the way, there's this. And you go, whoa.
Yeah.
You're like, are you kidding me? And I know if you're listening to me, you're thinking like, well, was he part of a sex cult? So much weirder.
So much more interesting
scary
than that.
So much freakier.
And it's the kind of thing because narrative films are going to narrative films. But you know what? This is the thing you want to watch.
That's it.
This movie right here.
Yeah. Also got Liana, which is a wonderful, wonderful foreign doc. That's on Blu-ray, and this thing has racked up awards all over the world. This is about orphan. This is an African doc about orphan children that is done in I don't even know how to describe the style, and it's totally worth your time. It's like under 80 minutes. It comes by and it blows by, but it is. This is about a South African storyteller, a very famous South African storyteller whose name I cannot pronounce, and I'm not even going to try.
Yeah.
But he takes a group of 5 children who've all been orphaned to create a new and original fairy tale. And the fairy tale that they create is the story of Liana. And then they create an animated film around this fairy tale. And it's beautiful. And it's it's kind of a documentary, but it's kind of not. It's sort of an animated film, but it's not. It's all of these things, and it's a really remarkable thing. But what it is ultimately, it's about stories. And we take fairy tales and legends and the ancient stories for granted. We take Beowulf for granted. We take the Mahabharata for granted. We take all, whether they're religious stories or not, or legends. We just take the Iliad, the Odyssey. We take all these things for granted without realizing what may have gone into them. And this is sort of like revisiting that process. And it's really, really fascinating, and it's beautiful, and it's a wonderful film. It is Liana, and you can learn more about it by going to Liana Film, LIYANA film.com.
I happen to have hosted a screening of that for the International Documentary Association. Tandy Newton, who's the voice, and who happened to be there. Fantastic, lovely film.
Good stuff. So do we want to do? Let me do some foreign. I'll hit
do
some
the foreign, and then I'll come back to
TV.
Okay.
Yeah. So got a couple from Cohen, who we love very much because Tim and I have been paid by them to do commentaries. We've got a new one and an old one. The Contemporary Classics line from Cohen Media Group is Britt-Marie Was Here, which stars the very, very wonderful and always engaging Pernilla August, who is the wife of Billy August. And they met, of course, making The Best Intentions, which won the Cannes Film Festival in 1992, which was my first year there. And then they got married, and they're a lovely couple. And now Pernilla August, who played Ingmar Bergman's mother in that Palme d'Or winning masterpiece, is now older. But she's still an absolutely delightful actress. And this is one of those... it's based on a novel by the same guy who wrote A Man Called Ove from a few years ago, which was Oscar nominated. So Pernilla August plays a housewife who's pretty much sick and tired of having been married to this bum for all these years and wasted her life. And she picks up and leaves. She just leaves the bastard. And now here she is in her mid-60s, and she's starting her life all over again. And she winds up basically coaching a kids' soccer team. For these like mostly immigrant and poor youths. And it's wonderful. It's a Swedish film. It's absolutely terrific. Now, yeah, it's totally one of those
Yes,
movies.
but those movies are always wonderful.
Movies are always wonderful. And, what the kids teach her and what she teaches them, she doesn't know anything about soccer. It's just a thing she's trying to do because she's trying to reinvent her life. But, man, it's just got so much heart, and it's just really, really sweet. I think they got it's a real gem. So, Britt-Marie was here. That's Britt-Mari. The classics of French cinema line from Cohen Film Collection they gave us the 2-part Jacques Rivette movie Joan the Maid, which is bloody amazing. The story of Joan of Arc has been told so many times. I am of the opinion this is the only time it's been done right. But bear in mind, it's Jacques Rivette. It's long. Jacques Rivette made La Belle Noiseuse, which was theatrically released at 4 hours, not including intermission, which is an incredible film. I went and saw it in the theater, all 4 hours of it, and it's mind-boggling. But Jacques Rivette, one of the pioneers of the French New Wave, doesn't really care what you think about the length of his movies. He's old enough now. Anyway, this was made in 1993. He went to town. Sandrine Bonnaire, who at the time was, a few years after her Sans Toi Ni Loi Vagabond César win, stars as Joan of Arc. And they did a 4K restoration, transferred it to Blu-ray, and the total running time of the two films together is 336 minutes.
Whoa.
So that's over 5 hours. I just want to underline it's over 5 hours for the whole thing. Make some time, but it is so worth it. It is so worth it because it really, really is the only one that goes into all of the details of Joan of Arc. I mean, it really, really is an incredible film. It's just an incredible film. So good on Cohen for finally bringing that out because it was out previously and then disappeared. One of the more interesting Asian films from the last year was Long Day's Journey into Night, which was a selection of certain regard. Long Day's Journey into Night has just that Justin is quoted on the back here, by the way.
Our Justin Chang.
It's the continuous camera thing, and there's a 1 hour long sequence here that's one continuous.
It's legit, not like 1917.
No.
Not
it's
that.
Legit.
Yeah.
It's legitimately one continuous, uninterrupted, hour-long shot, and it's pretty amazing. The film was released in 3D, but I would almost say that doesn't really do anything. I'd rather watch it in 2D. Nonetheless, this is a super successful film in China. And it's kind of it's sort of a little bit like In the Mood for Love. It's a little bit like some Wong Kar-wai stuff in its style and its approach. It's basically about a guy who's trying to find a woman that had once disappeared that he once knew, and it's a little bit of a quest and a romance, and it's poetic and it's beautifully shot. And the movie theater shot is really just amazing and wonderful and magical. Jirga by Benjamin Gilmore. This is also kind of a big festival hit over time. This is an Afghan film made primarily about the Afghan conflict, entirely in Pashto, and feels very much, because of its location, obviously very influenced by Iranian film. And it's about it's about tribal culture in Afghanistan. It sort of goes into like Jirga. What a Jirga is a kind of a judicial ruling by village elders in the traditional cultures of the Pashtun, and it's quite an amazing film. It goes to all of the cultural divides that make that conflict so incredibly difficult, and basically it's all kind of told from the point of view of an Australian soldier who it feels as though he. Oh, I don't want to reveal this. So how do I put this? A soldier, he has a reason for revisiting it. I won't tell you what his reason is, but he has to go back to Afghanistan to play part in a Jirga. That's all I'll tell you. I won't tell you anything else. It's really important that all that kind of be a surprise. So anyway, there's that. And then the last two here, Battle of Stalingrad. Boy, by the way, as a detour, you see the trailer for Greyhound, the Tom Hanks thing?
Oh, no, not
You
yet.
wrote?
No.
So Tom Hanks optioned a book, I guess, wrote the screenplay himself. Some guy directed it I've never heard of. But it's basically a story of a commander of a ship during World War II, and when they were, I guess, surrounded by U-boats and whatnot. Big naval battle story.
Mm-hmm.
Never been told before. Tom Hanks, of course, plays the captain of the ship.
Tom has that particular
Looks
World War II
terrific,
thing.
though.
Yeah.
Looks terrific. I mean, it's mostly CG, clearly, all the battle stuff, but not in like a really annoying midway,
yeah,
Pearl Harbor way.
Yeah.
It looks like they really went to great lengths to make it not obviously CG and to not kind of go lowbrow.
It's Greyhound.
Yeah, Greyhound. Anyway, on that note, the Battle of Leningrad is a very, very impressive German-made film that deals specifically with the Battle of Leningrad. And this was made in 2019, or released in 2019, never got a theatrical release in the United States, but it does a very good job of walking a middle line between melodrama and being relatively accurate to the events in question that happened in September 1941. Battle of Leningrad is just an incredible piece of history, and it's never been adequately treated on film. I think this is about 85% of what it actually deserved. It's quite a good film. Well done. And then lastly, Synonyms by Nadav Lapid. This was a winner of the Golden Bear at Berlin, and was kind of in the mix for a moment with our awards. A lot of people were naming this, and it didn't really kind of make it out. But nonetheless, winning Berlin is not a slouchy thing. This is a really, really superb film. It is. It's actually a very unusually funny movie in ways that you simply wouldn't necessarily expect. It stars Tom Mercier. Did Tom Mercier get some love in our voting?
He got some votes. I don't know that he won, but yes, he was at the top of the
really
folks
good.
we were talking about in this movie.
Well,
very droll he is.
Very droll, really talented. I'd love to see him. I hope he can speak English because he would just be terrific in some films here too. Anyway, he plays this Israeli guy who wants to start a new life, and he goes to Paris. And the problem here is that well, not so much a problem, but he resolves that he's not going to speak Hebrew. He's only going to speak French using his dictionary.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like being plunged into the fire. He's gonna sink or swim as far as the language is concerned. And the script is so clever and funny. And it's based on Nadav Lapid's own experience. He directed The Kindergarten Teacher previously. Mm-hmm. It's based on his own experience, and it feels very, but it just doesn't. The way that it uses language and situations and timing is very, very clever and very smart, and wonderful music to boot. So, Synonyms, winner of the Golden Bear on Blu-ray.
The point of the title being that there aren't any
yes,
between languages. Don't look for them. There's no equivalent between any languages really. I got a few TV thingies here, kind of an odd mishmash of things here, beginning with Ultraman, Return of Ultraman, the original, not the original, but the second series, 1971 to 1972, which marks, as it says, the return of Ultraman. But in fact, this is a different Ultraman, because if you know what happens at the end of the first series, you know it has to be a different Ultraman.
Yeah.
But he's from the same nebula M78, and apparently all the creatures in this nebula more or less look the same and wear the same suit. And have the same fighting style. This one is kind of cool though. It's updated, for the early '70s with all kinds of new creatures for Ultraman to have to fight. And a speed racer had become something of a thing by then. So our co-character who's running around, Hideo Go, is a race car driver in this series, and it's really wicked cool. And I just absolutely love it. The Return of Ultraman. The suit's a little bit cleaner and slicker, and Ultraman can move a little bit better in this series than he could in the original series, which is kind of neato torpedo. You got to let me borrow that one for sure. Yeah. And it brings us, of course, to a two-film set, Ultraman Orb, Origins of Ultraman, and Ultraman Fight. Now, Ultraman Orb Origin Saga is actually a sequel to Ultraman Fight Orb. These are live action films, and they're both films set in the world of Ultraman. The second one, the Origin Saga, is 12 episodes, and it brings us into the notion of where the Ultraman characters come from. You gotta love it. A lot of familiar characters here, along with some new characters that Ultraman has to fight. And again, you gotta let me borrow these, dude. These stuff like this is like time machines for me. It's just it's pure time travel. Hanging out with that stuff 2 or 3 times a week. Ancient Aliens season 12. Man, if you had asked me 12 years ago or however long that this thing would last for 12 seasons, I don't know. I don't even know what to say about that. On the History Channel, this is volume 2. And it takes us to all kinds of wacky places, looking at geoglyphs on Mars that aren't geoglyphs at all. They're just mountainous ranges. Theorists explain extraterrestrial contacts around the world, but they don't really because there haven't been any. African remote viewing of UFO targeting operations, which also don't actually exist. Nevertheless, all of this stuff is discovered in the 12 episodes of and you know what drives me crazy about this series is that it's executive produced by Kevin Burns.
Yeah.
Who's,
Ken Burns' brother.
Yeah. And I'm like, dude, you're killing the whole family thing here.
Yeah.
With this goofy crap. Ancient Aliens season 12. And then the television series, the complete series of The Affair, which began in 2014. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, was adapted from an Australian series, but I'll have to check myself on that. And it's this really powerful, dramatic series, ran for 5 seasons, about an affair had by a couple in this small town and how that affair affects everything in both of their families' lives over the course of the next several years.
Wow.
And it's a really, really, really well done series. It's not particularly hyperbolic. It's not about... There's a little crime mystery that sort of works its way through the narrative as well. But Maura Tierney in it, Joshua Jackson in it. A really, really neat, powerful series. All kinds of special features on this set for you to partake in. And if you like really good dramas, The Affair is definitely one complete series.
A few more foreign films here. Some really, really good stuff. So, An Elephant Sitting Still, one of the more interesting Chinese films from last year. This is by a filmmaker named Hu Bo. This was also in our awards mix.
Yeah.
And we were on a marathon to obviously see everything. And then everybody was like, I said, should I see Elephant Sitting Still? And everybody was telling me like, oh, yeah, you should definitely see Elephant Sitting Still. But you do, it's 4 hours, right? Yeah. And I said, yeah, it's not going to make the cut. I could watch 3 other movies in that 4-hour period. I got to start checking things off. I know a 4-hour Chinese movie is not going to be in the running for any major awards.
No,
it just isn't.
Not enough people will have seen it.
But it is interesting. What's funny is the quote that they chose to print on this, and this is from who did release this? Remember who released this, but anyway, it looks like it's Rediance. Kim Stim. This is Kim Stim release. So the quote they choose to go with is a Béla Tarr quote. Now, Béla Tarr, for those who don't necessarily know, is the Hungarian filmmaker who is primarily renowned for making very slow, long, boring movies. That's what he does. Béla Tarr movies take forever. And Béla Tarr, this is funny. He says, "This movie will be with us forever." Now, on my first reaction was, damn, for a guy who makes movies as long as yours, what he means is this movie's going to be with us forever. It never ends. It's still going on. I started watching it. It's still with us. It's 4 hours long. It's basically a very brooding drama about the toll of Chinese economic development on the people who are left behind.
Yeah.
And it goes into a mythical place. The title comes from this very particular mythical place in China where presumably there's an elephant that a kind of mystical elephant that doesn't move. Anyway, An Elephant Sitting Still is an interesting film, but man, you got to have the 4 hours to dedicate to it. Olivia is a really amazing thing. Icarus Films and Distrib Films have released this. This is incredible. Jacqueline Audry was one of the first significant French female filmmakers. She made this in 1950. They restored it a couple of years ago. It's totally unknown to a certain generation. I didn't know this movie even existed. It is a fascinating all-female cast. It's about basically the politics of a girls' boarding school and the horrors that go on inside, and the clashes and the conflicts and whatnot, and what happens. And it's really, really interesting. It's really well done. It's very polished. I know nothing about Jacqueline Audry. She's interviewed here. There's a rare 1957 interview with her. And now I'm suddenly fascinated by this woman's career that I've never heard of before. So it's called Olivia, and it's on Blu-ray from Icarus Films and Distrib Films. And then there's also Give Me Liberty, which was also at Cannes and Sundance, which is fun. Not exactly a fish out of water movie, but it's basically about this guy in Milwaukee. He's a medical transport driver, and then he has to kind of detour his normal driving chores to drive his grandfather, his Russian grandfather, and a bunch of other Russians to a funeral. And, it's kind of like a fish out of bus or something. But it's funny, it's sweet, it's frenetic, it's unpredictable, it's a little slapsticky, it's touching, it's humanistic. It kind of does all those things. And it's a good, solid little movie. Give Me Liberty from Music Box Films. And then the last one here is from Screen Media. It is Lose, which is one of the very rare genre films that we sometimes get from certain overseas markets. This is a German-Spanish co-production. And this is from Screen Media and Altered Innocence. You can get more on them from alteredinnocence.net. But it's about a cab driver who has just barely escaped from a woman who is completely and totally possessed, presumably, and it takes some very unorthodox twists and turns. A couple of them I thought I saw coming. Some of the others I didn't. Not sure if they completely work, but anyway. I think it's trying to do a little bit of what. Who are those guys that do all the Blumhouse?
Oh, yeah.
Trying to be a little bit German Blumhouse in style. It was shot in 16. It's trying to really go for a little bit of a gritty thing, a certain gritty fear. Movies that are a little too polished aren't quite as scary as others. So, it has a little kind of an exploitation feel to it, like the Euro schlock era is a little bit in its DNA as well. It's worth checking out. It's called Lose if you like that if you like that genre, if you like the European approach to supernatural horror and suspense. It's worth checking out.
Shall I knock off a couple over here?
Yeah.
Let's do a few of these. These are just movies, not
classics,
classic movies, and including this one, an actual classic called The Point. This is an animation with songs written and sung by Harry Nilsson, although narrated by Ringo Starr. This is from 1972. This wonderful animation is from the Academy Award-winning animator Fred Wolf, whom most folks will know mostly because of the Flintstones.
Oh.
Fred Wolf was the animator of the Flintstones,
nice.
among a great many other sort of television cartoons from that period. This was this sort of fantastically wonderful notion here about this place called Pointland, where everything has a point. All the buildings, all the cars, everything has a point, except for one little boy called Oblio, who does not have a pointed head. He has a rounded head. This is a wonderful film. It's very, very charming. The voice of the little boy, is Mike Lookland from the old Brady Bunch series in 1972. So he would be about the age that he was when he was playing Bobby Brady on the Brady Bunch, this little boy. And it's just a wonderfully done film. This is a 2K restoration, high definition transfer from the 16 millimeter elements, and it's really, really just wonderful. All kinds of special features on here, including lots and lots of interviews from people who were involved in lots of animation and neat stuff from back in the day. And it's a great story with some really wicked animation. A little Mike Lookland, Bobby Brady, gotta love that. Mind Games, Bob Yari. Bob Yari is known more as a producer.
Yeah.
But he did direct 2 films, including this one and another one of them called Papa Hemingway a couple of years ago. But Mind Games, way back in the 1980s, Maxwell Caulfield, Edward Albert film. It was one of those films about a guy who takes his family on a trip up to Northern California, wherever they're going. They pick up a hitchhiker. played by Maxwell Caulfield, who's a psychology student. And you know what that means? He's going to play mind games, hack and slash film. But like I said, Bob, better known as a producer of Academy Award-winning things like Crash.
Yeah.
I think is one of his. But, this is an okay mystery thriller, part of the Rewind collection from MVD. Wild America. Jonathan Taylor Thomas. I can remember when he was on that sitcom. What was Tool Time?
Yeah.
He was one of the little guys on that sitcom.
That's right.
And I always thought he was a handsome kid. I thought he was going to grow up to be a big movie star. Yeah.
Home Improvement.
Yeah. Home Improvement. That was the name
Home
of it.
Improvement.
But, I don't know. Although he did make this neat little movie, this is just an adventure story about these three brothers who drive around the country shooting endangered wildlife. They go on an adventure. Something happens along the way, and they have to engage in their own self-reliance and bravery to pull themselves out of a bit of a pickle. This was a neat movie at the time. I remember people liked it a lot. William Deere film of this one. Not bad. Angel Eyes. Jennifer Lopez had that run of movies where she more or less played some sort of a character, some sort of a. Well, there you go, Made in Manhattan,
which I'm going to talk about in just a second.
And for a moment, she stepped out of that to play this cop in this movie called Angel Eyes.
I think Angel Eyes is one of her best performances.
It's one of her best performances. Yeah. It's a straight up through Jim Caviezel in the movie. Yeah. It's a nice thriller. And it really opens with a very intense sequence.
It is.
There, and it's just it wasn't one of those movies.
It's a super underrated movie, and that image on the cover of the Blu-ray, I think is the reason it didn't do better.
Because it wasn't Jennifer Lopez's.
It wasn't clearly Jennifer Lopez's face.
Yeah, that might be interesting.
That's why.
Interesting little movie. You want to take a couple?
Yeah, so as long as we're on the Jennifer Lopez train, I'll jump right to Made in Manhattan, which is just a straight-up romantic comedy with Ralph Fiennes. It's basically My Fair Lady or Pygmalion. She's a maid and she winds or a Pretty Woman.
Yeah.
It's basically that. She plays a maid and then of course she winds up, landing Ralph Fiennes and it's a princess story.
Oh, and she's literally made that movie 15 times.
She's made this movie over and over and over. And look, I'm sorry. I'll be honest. The movie loses credibility the moment that you see Jennifer Lopez as a maid.
The face, no.
You can't disappear into that role no matter how good you are.
Yeah,
she can disappear as a stripper
or
as a pole dancer.
Oh, yeah.
But as a maid,
no,
that doesn't work. That's like Barbra Streisand in The Mirror Has Two Faces.
Yeah.
She's Babs from the second that movie starts.
Yeah, it's like, no.
And then like midway through the movie, there's that shot of going up the mirror, and there she is. And Barbara has now officially gone to wardrobe, and she's now Barbara. She's like, she is who you always. Come on, stop it. There are certain things that stretch credibility. Gracie's Choice, only on DVD, has a very young Kristen Bell in it, along with Diane Ladd and Anne Heche. And you forget how good Kristen Bell really can be as an actress. She's very, very young in this. This was made in 2004, 16 years ago. 16 years ago. But anyway, it's effectively a family drama. She's a young girl. She's had a drug addict for a mom. She's kind of had to raise herself. And now she's 17, and she's got to basically be there for her younger siblings, where her mom wasn't. So that's it. Anne Heche plays her mom. Diane Ladd plays the grandma. And they're a really great trio. And it's a solid little movie that most people probably haven't heard of. Everything else here from Mill Creek, those are both from Mill Creek. Everything else here, these are Mill Creek double features. The first one here is on DVD only, not Blu-ray. It's a couple of Native American themed stories, The Pathfinder and The Song of Hiawatha. Neither of them very good. The Pathfinder is based on a James Fenimore Cooper story. Could and should have been better. It's got Russell Means and Graham Greene in it, kind of holding it down. Kevin Dillon and Stacy Keach don't necessarily. Song of Hiawatha is a little bit better. Graham Greene's in that as well, along with Russell Means again and David Strathern, Michael Rooker. Bottom line, these are Graham Greene movies. That's it. They're his movies to kind of make or break, and he doesn't have a whole lot working with him going along. Double feature of Dad and I'm Not Rappaport. All about people growing older. Jack Lemmon and Ted Danson and Ethan Hawke play the three generations in Dad. It's a very sweet, affecting movie. Gary David Goldberg wrote and directed it, who of course created Family Ties, and it's it was his attempt to kind of take his pathos into theaters, and it didn't quite pan out, but it's better than people give it credit for. And I'm Not Rappaport is a very theatrical adaptation of what's basically a two-person play. It's fine. Walter Matthau and Ossie Davis are good, but they're basically doing what they did on stage. So, I mean, it doesn't give you much more than that. Reservation Road and Return to Paradise, not really my thing. These is kind of, millennial thrillers. Vince Vaughn, Anne Heche, and Joaquin Phoenix in Return to Paradise. And Joaquin Phoenix, Mark Ruffalo, Jennifer Connelly, and Mira Sorvino in Reservation Road. Both are of a certain type of film that was a thing in the 1990s primarily. Thrillers that are very kind of human thrillers and trying to be thriller and drama at the same time. I mean, they're okay. They have decent casts. I just don't think that the two movies have lasted very well. Terry Pratchett is an author who writes kind of fantasy novels, and they made two adaptations of them, The Color of Magic and Hogfather, neither of which I have ever heard of, neither of which is very good, to be honest. And those are on a double feature here as well. See them only if you want to see certain cast members in them. Tim Curry is fine in The Color of Magic, but otherwise there's not a whole lot going for it. It's kind of like second tier Harry Potter.
Few over here?
Yeah.
American Outlaws. This is a 2001 film. It's basically a cowboy movie with Jesse James at the center of it. Though the way it shapes itself is sort of interesting. Most interesting about this film is who's all in it back in 2001. You got Colin Farrell playing Jesse James, Scott Conn, Ali Lauder, Gabrielle Mock. You got Harris Yulin in this film. You got Kathy Bates in this film. Timothy Dalton's in the film. Terry O'Quinn, who people will know from Lost and other things. So, a whole bunch of folks in this interesting sort of cowboy movie. In and of itself, it's about the roads coming in, the corrupt railroad magnates buying up all this land, mostly this rancher land, illegally. Coming by these deeds, and then these sort of young rancher guys, which is what Jesse James and his family had been, and his brothers, they had been ranchers. And in fact, their ranch was stolen by a bunch of dirty railroad guys, and that did, in fact, set them off on what began a long crime spree that involved robbing a whole lot of banks until Jesse got himself shot. This has all kinds of deleted scenes in it. What's interesting is just to watch all these actors way back in the day. Young Colin Farrell.
Oh, man, I do remember that.
Not long after Tigerland, this would have been.
He's starting to age a little bit, but really slowly.
They're very, very slow,
Which is unusual because, those Irish genes and alcohol and everything else that goes on up there, you tend to run into people who look like they're about 80 and they've just turned 25. That's the thing. I'm part Irish. I can say that.
Oh, boy, oh, boy.
So, really interesting thing has just come out from Kino Lorber. It's called, it's a box set, Forbidden Fruit, The Golden Age of the Exploitation Picture, which we are very connected to because this is also the 20th anniversary of our documentary, Schlock, The Secret History of American Movies. And we talk about some of this in there. Mom and Dad was a seminal movie as far as exploitation films go. This is volume 1 of the set, and this movie was banned for 11 years, believe it or not. It's actually now in the National Film Registry of the Library of Congress. But it's one of those, it's basically a cautionary, the public health movies. This is all about venereal disease and everything else that goes along with being sexually promiscuous. It's funny, it's shocking, it's all those things, and it was made by Kroger Babb, who we talk about in Schlock as one of the sort of seminal figures in creation of the exploitation film. So anyway, this was made in 1945, literally right at the beginning of that era. Post-war era is when all this stuff starts and really just blows up in the 1960s. But as far as the sex hygiene films, this is where it really all begins. The next one here is, of course, Reefer Madness, which they include along with Sex Madness. Same thing. Reefer Madness needs no introduction. This is from the Something Weird Library, who we know them very, very well. And Reefer Madness has been made into a musical, which is how we actually start our Schlock documentary. So this feels like a supplementary set to ours, and I think it's pretty great. Reefer Madness and Sex Madness, still very fun. And then the last one gets into the nudism films, which
the nudie cuties,
the nudie cuties, and the nudist camp movies. And this one is called Unashamed, and they include it with Elysia, Valley of the Nude. Now, Unashamed is billed as a romance. It's like, well, that's a good thing because it's naked people. It'd be terrible if there weren't some romance going on. And they also say actually filmed in a nudist camp because that was such a shocking thing at the time, right? It's 1930s and that these things actually existed. I mean, wow, how strange. Anyway, 1938, Unashamed, a romance, and Elysia, Valley of the Nude, 1933. Keep in mind, nudist camp movies don't really take off until the 1950s, so this is more than a decade, almost 2 decades ahead of the curve. And it's actually shockingly well photographed for a couple of very early exploitation films, fringe films, also from the Something Weird library, with a great audio commentary from Alexander Helen Nicholas on Unashamed, and a 1937 short called Nudist Land, a 1933 short called Why Nudism, and a really fun little 5-minute ditty called Hollywood Script Girl from 1938.
Few over here from 1994. I remember, I think I covered the junket for this movie, if I'm not mistaken. I certainly remember interviewing the perfectly beautiful Joanne Whaley at the time. Eventually became Joanne Whaley Kilmer, Val Kilmer's, I think, maybe first wife.
I think so.
If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Armand Assante, Gabriel Byrne in this film, and William Hurt. This is a film about a young woman who is picked up to sit on a jury trial of a mob boss who committed murder and is threatening, unbeknownst to everyone else, her son. And it's about what she's going to do. Particularly to save her son. They made a lot of thrillers like this back in the day. They were all really, really good. They don't really make these anymore. These are television or streaming movies now. Back in the day, this was feature film material. Directed by Woody Gould, a director friend of mine, who I've known for quite a long time. Victory, 1981, Sylvester Stallone film. A film with Sylvester Stallone in it anyway. So Michael Caine, the great Pele in this film, directed by John Huston. So this is a film that at the core of it has these two teams playing, the Aryan sort of Nazi team playing to prove Aryan superiority as they do, and then a sort of hodgepodge of Americans and Brits and Brazilians and whatnot playing on the Allied team. What's neat about this movie is that while the whole sort of who's better the soccer players is at play, what they're really doing is planning an escape, and it's a hell of a movie. Besides, the great Pele is in this movie.
I'm still a real apologist for this movie. John Huston, Pele, I'm done.
Yeah, the rest of it, whatever the hell.
Yeah.
Football. Tex Avery.
Oh, Tex.
Love this Screwball Classics Volume 1. Gotta love Tex. Tex gave us
Droopy
Dog, and he simply gave us a different sort of cartoon animation, different than what Walt was doing on the other side of town.
Different from Warner Brothers.
Different from what the Warner Brothers guys were doing on the other side of town. He just, it was just a different sort of thing that he gave us. He was funny.
Eyeballs that pop out of your head.
He was just being funny. He was being
thing.
goofy. And this is a really, really wonderful dog. It includes all kinds of stuff, many of the Red Hot Riding Hood and all that kind of stuff. Very, very saucy. Tex could be
fantastic
occasionally.
Stuff. Great stuff.
I love this Laurence Olivier movie from 1979, A Little Romance.
I have a story about this. So I hated Little Romance for a long time, and I'll tell you why. Because that was one of the first Academy Awards that I actually felt very invested in, because Star Trek: The Motion Picture was up for 3 awards: special effects, art and set direction, and Jerry Goldsmith's score. It wound up losing all 3. I was convinced that it should have won all 3. There was no question it was going to win them, because what did I know at the time, you know? And when it came to score, I loved that. I've listened to that score by that point maybe 150 times. And they announced, and the winner of Best Original Score is A Little Romance, Georges Delerue. And I sat there and I cursed at the top of my lungs, who the hell is this Georges Delerue that beat Jerry Goldsmith? Jerry Goldsmith! And of course, within about a year, I discovered that Georges Delerue is, in fact, George Delarue.
Yeah, Academy Award. This was a lovely film. An older Laurence Olivier.
Yeah.
Very, 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 very young Diane Lane.
Oh, so good.
This beautiful little romance going on him as he sort of ushers them together on their little thing. It's just the cutest little thing. George Roy Hill film. Special features: Remembering Romance with Diane Lane. Reflecting on this perfectly lovely little movie. Fantastic indeed. Oh, my phone is ringing someplace here, but I think I just smacked it off. A Bell, Book, and Candle, James Stewart, Kim Novak, and another charming film, a kind of film that you really can't make today. Kim Novak is just rich.
One of the films that inspired Bewitched.
Bewitched,
Bewitched, by the way.
Bewitched, Bothered and Bewildered. An ordinary guy. She's a witch. She can't fall in love. She puts a spell on him. He has his fiancée, and she realizes it's just the sweetest movie.
They basically took this and then My Wife the Witch and combined them into the TV series Bewitched. It was great. Got a couple of it's all good. So we've got a couple of Robert Altman films here. One good and one not so good, and it's fascinating. You get the range of Robert Altman's career here, but probably both worth checking out. So Beyond Therapy, which has an amazing cast, but it's just everything that Robert Altman does not do well, is kind of a good example. This is from 1987, and look at this: Jeff Goldblum, Tom Conti, Christopher Guest, Glenda Jackson, and Julie Haggerty in Beyond Therapy, which is just not funny. Jeff Goldblum is this kind of neurotic guy in New York, and he winds up meeting people through personal ads, and then everything goes into this ridiculous satire of therapy and dating, and it's like, it's like the Bob Newhart show, except longer and less funny, and it doesn't really work at all. But it's interesting because you can see Altman being very Altman with something that doesn't lend itself to it. And you know what? He was at least taking a chance. On the other hand, you have Arrow Academy's release of Kansas City, which is, I think, one of Altman's most underrated movies. This was made in 1995. Yeah. And it is basically it's a gangster film set during the Depression, and it looks at Kansas City and what how it was.
Particularly the Kansas City jazz scene.
A snapshot of a moment in time when Kansas City was, and we've talked about this. Kansas City and St. Louis are kind of as important musically as New Orleans.
As New Orleans, particularly when it comes to jazz, right up through Chicago. Yeah.
And so
Harry Belafonte, just great in that movie.
Oh, it's I mean, this is just a great film. I mean, Harry Belafonte, Miranda Richardson, Jennifer Jason Leigh, Dermot Mulroney, Steve Buscemi. It's a typically great Altman cast, but it is a very, very, it's a beautifully rendered film, beautiful art direction and production design, well photographed, lots of great extras on here. 2007 visual essay by a French film critic who also does introductions to the film, has the original Robert Altman commentary that he recorded, thank goodness, before he passed. And it's just wonderful. It has, all the EPK press kits that were originally distributed with it. It's a great film, and I'm glad Arrow Academy discovered it. So I would recommend you watch both Beyond Therapy and Kansas City if you are an Altman completist. But this is pretty great.
And the unrated producer's cut of Hot Dog the Movie. I actually remember going to see this movie with my wife way the hell back in 1984. And I can very much remember what it felt like when she smacked me. For taking her to see this stupid movie in 1984.
One of my wife's childhood friends, her father was a producer, a financier in this or something. Anyway, this was like my wife's first R-rated movie when she was a kid or something.
It's just the wackiest thing. Guys go, they go screening. For some reason, there's like topless women. All over this movie. It's the entire point of this movie.
Skiing and titillation. It's what they did in the 80s.
Yeah, little special features. This is a brand new 4K restoration. All kinds of special features, audio commentary with the writer and co-producer Mike Marvin. It's one of those goofy movies from back in the day, like Porky's and two or three others from that early 80s period when
joysticks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All that kind of stuff. Anyway,
Going All the Way with Tom Cruise.
Yeah, I really love that movie. American Pie presents Band Camp, Unrated. Another of the many lingering American Pie movies. The only person from the original American Pie films that's in this is Eugene Levy.
It's kind of sad, right?
Everybody else is like 45 years old. And Eugene Levy still walking around these movies. Whatever. Kind of goofy and silly. All kinds of bonus features, outtakes, deleted scenes, American Pie Band Camp. A funny joke, if you actually remember the original American Pie film. An original film. Look, I got to tell you, this movie, at the time, I did the junket for this movie, Clueless, Alicia Silverstone's film. And it was just this absolutely charming Valley Girl spoof movie about this young girl who talked this sort of certain way at this school. You got Paul Rudd in this movie. This was just an absolutely charming movie when it came out. I think it's like 1995 or something like that. And Alicia Silverstone went on to have a career for a while there. A lot of other folks worked all over television for many, many years coming out of this movie. And I remember it as a perfectly charming, very, very funny movie. Clueless, Alicia Silverstone, 1995.
We have got a bunch of great stuff to wrap out with now. I'm going to start with the one that's most obviously going to be for Easter and Passover. Everybody loves to watch the Ten Commandments.
Ah, yes.
And
it's Easter when the Ten Commandments is on.
It's been out before. You don't necessarily need to upgrade. However, this is nice. It's got both the 1923 and the 1956 films in here. The original Cecil B. DeMille silent, and then his 1956 remake, which, by the way, is still one of the 10 most successful films of all time in terms of tickets sold. And it is also the only film, this is interesting, if you look at the top, in terms of adjusted for inflation, like the top 20 films of all time, there's only one of them directed by somebody who's over 50. This one.
That one?
That's the only one. Once you're over 50, you don't direct blockbusters anymore.
It goes downhill. Huh?
It goes downhill.
Because I would have thought John Huston would be on that list, but I guess not.
No.
Plainly not.
So anyway, this is a new set. It's got a little collectible booklet. It's got, it's a digipack case, so it's a little fragile, but it's fine. It's a nice little booklet in it, and the features, it's got some extra features for both the 1923 and the 56 films. The original newsreel of the premiere in New York for the 1956 film is fun, but ultimately it's the Blu-ray of the Ten Commandments. You're watching it to watch Charlton Heston do his his shtick and his thing. And Yul Brynner just being so amazing in it. And then from Film Movement Classics, two films from Alexander McKendrick, the amazing Alexander McKendrick, who, when he was working at Ealing Studios, almost all of his stuff was for Ealing Studios in the 1940s and 50s. And the films are Whiskey Galore and The Maggie. Whiskey Galore is one I was not overly familiar with, but it is really, really great. I mean, it's amazing. It's about a Scottish island where they can't get access to whiskey, and it's really, it's a very simple idea, and it's just taken to the outrageous extreme. And Maggie is also incredibly funny, which is about this boat captain. Here's the thing, Alexander McKendrick, and you get some good extras on here. There's an audio commentary for Whiskey Galore, a documentary, a featurette, and then a great booklet. But what you should do to really appreciate Alexander McKendrick is watch Sweet Smell of Success on the Criterion Channel.
Thank you.
Or get the Blu-ray. Because I just did that 3 days ago. And it's interesting because he taught out here, McKendrick did, at Art Center. And one of his students at the time was James Mangold, recently the Oscar-nominated director, or the director of the Oscar-nominated Ford versus Ferrari and many other fine things. And Mangold goes into great detail about McKendrick's, who had like all of these aphorisms of what you do and don't do and how you create drama and how you don't, like these laundry list of rules that were tacked all over the classroom. And when you realize, when you watch that featurette and then you watch Sweet Smell of Success, as amazingly staged as it is, and then you go back and you watch a film like this is a comedy. You don't realize how much craft goes into it. McKendrick was an amazing craftsman. And if you pay attention to his staging, his camera work, and everything else, it's miraculous, just absolutely miraculous. And then we've also got Masked and Anonymous from Shout Select, which has kind of disappeared a little bit from the radar. This had a tremendous cast in it at the time. This is 2003, not that long ago. Jeff Bridges and Luke Wilson and Jessica Lange, John Goodman, Bob Dylan, Penelope Cruz. and this movie just kind of evaporated. But it's an interesting kind of Sundancey drama from the era, and there were a number of these movies that kind of tried to look at a particular aspect of Americana from the side, from a vantage, and where we're sort of fraying as a society around the edges, and this is one of those, and Bob Dylan kind of sort of plays himself. He's this traveling musician who's about to be sort of the headliner of this very unwise particular benefit concert, and from there everything kind of goes in a little bit Altman-esque direction. Doesn't quite work. Larry Charles directed it, does a commentary. Some very interesting stuff in it. Really good performances. Doesn't entirely hang together. Good making of featurette, but it's worth watching just the same. And then we're going to go out with this amazing Criterion release of one of the most legendary documentaries of all time. It is an absolute essential film to have in any library, whether or not you like documentaries or not. From 1969, the Maysles brothers and Charlotte Zwerin made Salesman, which, as far as I'm concerned, changed the landscape for documentary filmmaking.
Absolutely.
It is like the original direct cinema documentary of a certain type. It's completely restored with a 4K digital transfer, and there's Bill Hader talks about it on there. He's a big fan of it.
We follow a door-to-door
salesman. That's it.
That's all we do. For one thing, there were door-to-door salesmen.
I remember them.
I remember them too. You were old enough to remember them.
Yeah.
Actual your vacuum cleaners, World Book encyclopedias.
That's it. That's where we bought our World Book from.
That's how we got our World Book.
Yeah.
Door-to-door salesman sold them.
It's an amazing film because it's not just about salesmen. It's about all of us. It's about the salesman in all of us.
And of course, this is at a moment when that is fading away.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that we're actually watching is that this is an occupation that is not going to exist anymore soon.
Very true. All right, with that, we are done this week, and here's hoping that Woody Allen's book gets picked up. Soon.
Look, this is why that's dumb too. There's a thing now called self-publishing.
Yeah.
Woody don't need you to publish his book.
He doesn't.
So,
But you know what's going to happen. Then they'll boycott Amazon.
Yeah.
The book burners are going to be out in force because they do not want anyone reading his point of view.
And they will fail. Here's what's funny. Didn't have any particular intention of reading Woody's book. Love Woody's work still.
Yeah.
But I'm a historian of Woody.
Yeah.
So that's what I want to know about Woody.
Yeah.
Personal point of view. I get very with that kind of stuff. But now I'm gonna have to buy the book.
Yep.
They actually they're forcing me
to buy the book. Well, there it is.
Yeah.
That's the fallout. All right, everybody. Have a great week. We'll see you soon. Don't get the coronavirus. Just stay locked up in your house and keep listening to this life-saving podcast.